But we begin this hour with the famous words of our country's 16th president that has long been used to define our democracy. In his 1863 Gettysburg Address, President Abraham Lincoln uttered the words, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people." In other words, our democracy is a government created by, run by, and serving the interests of its citizens. But our latest president has come to define our democracy very differently, where the government appears to be in place to serve his own interests. Take, for example, this week, lawyers for Donald Trump were engaged in talks with the IRS to try and resolve Trump's $10 billion lawsuit over the leak of his tax information during his first term. Trump's lawyers are trying to reach a settlement with Trump's IRS, overseen by Trump's Treasury Secretary, to pay out millions of dollars, if not more, of taxpayer-collected funds into Trump's pocket. It's not the only department overseen by Trump that he's looking to get a big payday from. Last fall, Trump demanded that the Justice Department pay him about $230 million in compensation for the federal investigations into him, again looking to have his appointed DOJ officials, who also were his defense lawyers or his aides pre-presidency, sign off on such a payment. No final announcement on that has yet to be made. And joining us now to discuss these and many other ways that Trump and his family are using the government to serve themselves are Skye Perryman, President and CEO of Democracy Forward, and Norm Eisen, founder and executive chair of the Democracy Defenders Fund, and former special counsel and special assistant to President Obama. Thanks for joining us this morning, guys. Because I have a hard time keeping the dozens of cases that you're both litigating right now straight, I believe one of you are currently fighting against some of the issues that we just mentioned.
Yeah, I think both of us are. I mean, we have explained to the court in this crazy and baseless demand for $10 billion in Florida by the president that there is no jurisdiction for the court to even hear that. You can't have a dispute in the country that's the president versus himself. And he's gone out and said that. I'm suing for myself. I mean, he always keeps talking, and we think that will help carry the day. And then in our case around the $230 million demand, and let's just talk about how ridiculous it is that this is the president that is claiming the American people owe him $10 billion and now owe him $230 million. We've sued because they've withheld documents around this issue, and the court has entered an order we believe will start getting documents at the end of this month. So more to report on that probably later on in the next few days.
You guys called it collusive litigation, if I remember correctly.
Correct, collusive settlements.
Yeah. Mr. Eisen, you deal a lot in ethics. You're an ethics czar, if I remember correctly. You told President Obama that he couldn't have a second mortgage on his home while he was president because of the fact that it would give the idea of some kind of impropriety.
So quaint.
Yeah, so quaint. I miss those days. Reuters headline here. Trump's son Eric to join father's state visit to China. A Trump Organization spokesperson said he's attending in a personal capacity, does not have business ventures in China, nor plans to do business in China. I will leave it to you to say whether or not you believe that. But the president's son, who does a lot of business, who seems to be, according to a lot of reporting, profiting off the fact that his father sits in the Oval Office, is going on this trip to China. What does a responsible oversight body, I don't know, maybe in the building behind me, have to ask about that trip? What are the questions that you have?
At the Democracy Defenders Fund, we've been putting those questions out there with the business dealings of the Trump family, where they have made billions, often under very weird circumstances.
And we're not even done with year two.
Last week, we filed a legal complaint about one of Eric's companies, where he's a board observer and advisor, together with the president's friend and special envoy Steve Witkoff's son, the Alt Phi Sigma, where hundreds of millions of dollars have flowed into the Trump family crypto businesses. We have a whole department that has issued a series of these complaints on crypto. Then you have the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is running all over the Gulf while he has billions at Affinity Partners, his company, from the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, which have the strongest interests in the Iran conflict. Now, we have filed over 100 of these legal complaints about the family corruption. Why? Do we think when we file a complaint with the Inspector General of these government agencies that they're going to act on it? No, but we always copy Congress. And these people had better be aware of the fact that it looks like Congress is going to have subpoena authority. They're already looking into this. So expect the mother of all corruption investigations on the Trump administration in 2027.
Well, to talk about corruption, I just showed two headlines. One from MS Now from yesterday, excuse me, from Friday. Iran negotiator or private investor. Raskin launches investigation into Jared Kushner. And then you have the AP headline from April 2nd. Company backed by Trump's sons looks to sell drone interceptors to Gulf states being attacked by Iran. And this is a quote from Richard Painter, the former White House chief ethics czar under President George W. Bush. These countries are under enormous pressure to buy from the sons of the president so he will do what they want. This is going to be the first family of a president to make a lot of money off war, a war he didn't get the consent of Congress for. I mean, this has been what you just laid out, Norm, Sky, this idea that there's a war happening now, and the negotiators at the table are two businessmen. As
no
Norm
experience in diplomacy.
none at all, but as Norm pointed out, and as you well know, one of them is the son-in-law of the president who's got billions of dollars in business interests in the region. Is he negotiating a peace?
And his client is a company, of course, that is run by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
You know, yes.
MBS. So, to finish my thought, is he negotiating on behalf of the United States, or is he negotiating on behalf of himself, trying to calm things down so he doesn't get his money messed up?
I don't think we've seen this administration, and I truly mean this, it's not bluster. I don't think we've seen this administration do anything on behalf of the American people. And I think that you see that playing out now. But what the Hungarian elections tell us, and we're still, you know, reflecting on those from a week ago, and what we know from corrupt governments across the world, what we know from our own country, is corruption does not deliver. It does not deliver for people. And so the accountability that you're going to have, in addition to the hundreds of cases that we are all filing in court, the investigations that Congress needs to and will, I believe, further, the accountability is the American people. And you're going to see over and over again, we're already seeing such energy from people. You're looking towards the midterms. We're seeing deep red districts in special elections flip because people understand corruption and they understand that this administration is wheeling and dealing in corruption. And corruption does not deliver for people. It never has and it never will.
But do you think the corruption stories actually break through to your everyday people who are dealing with all the things that we bond over the fact that we're from Central? We both spend a lot of time in Central Texas. You're from Waco. I went to school in Killeen. Does it feel like folks in Waco, when they hear this conversation, they're like, you know what, I got to vote for a Democrat? Or does it feel like inside baseball?
Look, I think that we have a long way to go to continue to get people to connect the dots, but we're seeing that. You're seeing. I mean, look at what the data is showing and our personal experience shows. There are people in red areas across the country, in rural areas across the country, that are more consistently protesting than at any time that we've seen in modern history, including in the first Trump administration. These people understand corruption. They're highly skeptical of it, and they may have had a view that all of government is corrupt. And of course, we know that Trump has tried to prey on that view. His MAGA movement has tried to prey on that view. But this is really showing the reality here. Elon Musk running through Washington, D.C. with Doge. I mean, we remember that a year ago. Now this rank corruption.
Just a year ago.
Just a year ago, y'all. But corruption does not deliver. And that is going to be the key, I think, as we look to the midterms and as we look forward.
And I do think some of the corruption stories are breaking through because, remember, it's not just the staggering financial corruption. It's also the other abuses of entrusted power for personal self-interest, not the public interest. The Epstein case, which both Sky and I are litigating, that's a corruption scandal, too. Yeah. They are still hiding Trump Epstein documents while putting Ghislaine Maxwell, the witness, in a country club prison. We're in court on that. The Kennedy Center case, where I've been litigating. Donald Trump slapped his name on there. That's a form of corruption, too. We'll be in court to scrape that name off the building. I'll ask the judge, can I get up there and chisel it off myself? We'll be in court in about a week to fight over that. And those cases do break through. And I think the American people are saying, why have we lost a dozen American servicemen's lives and spent billions that could have been used to reduce my costs in this war? And all the innocent people who've been killed, that's a corruption scandal, too. And we filed a complaint with Richard Painter, actually, who is part of that Republican anti-war wing. So those things are breaking through, and they're all corruption, together with the lying, cheating, and stealing.
Just because we're out of time, I'm going to dumb down this question to make it as simple as possible for our viewers. What is the most imminent case that either of you have that you feel like you're about to win? Is it the Center case next week, or?
Well,
we won 5 cases last week, and sometimes just because the Department of Victory no, but truly, sometimes just because the Department of Justice now isn't even showing up, they're not responding on time. People who have done everything right in this country, filed all the right paperwork, are working or doing everything right to be part of this country, that the administration just tried to, pull out the rug from under them. We've been able to keep them in the country, and this week, I believe that you'll see some documents coming out of some of these corruption cases that the courts are going to argue.